Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Howard, and I'm thrilled to be your MC tonight. And I want to welcome the people who are joining us virtually by Zoom as well. And so this event is very special. It's to honor Marty Tankleff as the new Peter P. Mullen Distinguished Visiting Professor at Georgetown University. We're going to start first with a video tribute from some special guests who couldn't be here tonight in person, but who wanted to share some words about Marty.
Hi, my name is Steve Braga. It's my great pleasure to provide you with some thoughts on Marty Tankleff's recent appointment to become the Peter Mullen Distinguished Visiting Professor at Georgetown University. When I first met Marty in the fall of 1995 in a dark and dreary prison setting in upstate New York, it would have been preposterous to think that one day anyone would recognize him as distinguished. The further notion that such recognition might come from one of the most prestigious universities in the world, like Georgetown, would have been laughable. And yet, here we are. How did we get here? There's just something about Marty.
Hey Marty, this is Arend, your brother from another mother. I just want to congratulate you on your newly appointed position at Georgetown. It's truly earned. You know, you have proven over and over and over that you are a vanguard on the front line, fighting for justice and social change. And again, I want to salute you. You know, and I want to personally thank you. You know, you have always have a personal place in my heart. You know, when I was fighting my fight for freedom and justice.
Good evening. My name is Keith Washington, and I'm here to honor a man whose mission has been to help those who are wrongfully convicted and incarcerated and shine the light of truth and justice upon their cases. We're talking about Professor Marty Tankleff. He and other staff members and students at Georgetown University fought diligently on my behalf. That's why I'm able to stand before you a free man. It is with great admiration and respect that I salute Professor Tankleff for his work in the field of criminal justice reform.
Hey everybody, I'm kind of breaking the rules right now. I was asked to sit down and make this video, but there's no way I can sit down and make this video. Okay, I need to walk around, I need to show you guys how I am living. This is my apartment. Here's my fish tank. And if it wasn't for Marty, I wouldn't have my freedom to walk out and do just this right here. Just look at this beautiful view. Check that out. Look at the piece.
I want to congratulate Marty on being honored with the Peter Mullen Distinguished Professorship. It was my honor, really, to represent Marty a few years ago in his application for admission to the bar in New York. It was one of the high points in my career as a judge and as an attorney to stand with Marty in the same courtroom where his wrongful conviction had been overturned and watch as he was sworn in as an attorney in New York State.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Brown and I'm the Director of Policy with the Innocence Project. And I'm just so thrilled for Marty Tankleff due to his appointment to Georgetown for the Peter Mullen Distinguished Visiting Professor.
I've had the distinct honor of getting to know Marty first as his student, then his teaching assistant in making an exoneree, and now as his colleague in the innocence world. To know Marty is to witness human struggle and transcendence to the utmost degree.
Marty Tankleff is one of the most dedicated, genuine, and caring people that I have ever met. It was an absolute honor to have him as my professor during my final semester at Georgetown. As his former student, I can testify to the fact that he is somebody who genuinely cares about the lives of his students, both inside and outside of the classroom.
When I found out that Marty was going to be appointed as the Peter Mullen Distinguished Visiting Professor, I could not think of anyone else more deserving. And when I met Marty and when I took his class, and I not only felt more inspired to learn, but I also felt incredibly inspired by him and his story, and it pushed me beyond the classroom in ways that I could never have imagined.
What a joy today is. The appointment of Marty Tankleff to this distinguished chair brings tremendous pleasure and happiness to me. I am the judge who had to deny habeas in his original case so many years ago because the law required it, even though my intuition said that he was innocent. I worked after, and my clerks did too, to help bring about his release and his innocence established. But today he has accomplished more than anyone could imagine.
On behalf of Touro University's Jacob D. Fuchsberg Law Center, we want to extend our congratulations to our alum, Marty Tankleff, on his appointment as the Peter P. Mullen Distinguished Visiting Professor of Law at Georgetown University.
So congratulations, Marty, and congratulations to Georgetown and all of Marty's future students who have the absolute honor and privilege of being able to learn from him and be inspired by his light.
Congratulations, Professor Tankleff.
I love you, Marty. Thanks a lot, man. You never forgot me.
Marty, all the best and congratulations.
Marty, congratulations on this incredible achievement. You absolutely deserve this, and I cannot wait to see what you do with this appointment.
You make us proud every day. Congratulations.
What a day, what a joy, what an honor to be with you.
Congratulations, Marty. Well done, Georgetown. Hoya Saxa to all.
I now want to introduce my colleague and friend, Anthony Arend, who is the chair of the Department of Government, and who's going to tell us a little bit about the history of the Mullen Professorship. Tony.
So thank you very much, Mark. We come here this evening to honor three individuals. Marty Tankleff as the Peter Mullen Distinguished Professor. We also come here to honor Marc Howard. It was Marc's vision as the founding director of the Prisons and Justice Initiative that made this event possible and made so many other important things that are critical to Georgetown's tradition possible. So thank you, Marc. But we also come here to honor Peter Mullen. I knew Peter Mullen. I knew Peter Mullen when he was director of Georgetown's board of directors. Peter was here at a critical time at Georgetown, the transition between two presidents, Father Timothy Healy and Father Leo J. O'Donovan. And Peter managed that transition brilliantly as he represented Georgetown as a true Hoya. Peter was also well remembered as the great visionary at Skadden Arps. Now, when Peter came to Skadden Arps, there were about 10 attorneys present. Peter and Joseph Flom, the two of them built Skadden Arps into the great law firm, the international law firm that it is today. And so it's fitting that Peter's fellow partners wanted to create a lasting memory to Peter, something that would continue and something that would recognize his great presence at Georgetown. And so that was the basis for establishing the Mullen Professorship. The Mullen Professorship was to bring in the best practitioners like Marty, the best jurists, the best legal scholars that will come here to Georgetown and engage Georgetown students on the fundamental critical legal issues of our day. Peter is passed, but his daughter is present and is going to be talking to us in a little bit. But I cannot help but think that Peter could not be more proud to see this tradition continue and to see Marty as the occupant of the Mullen Professorship. So we thank Marty, we thank Marc, and we thank Peter. Hoya Saxa.
And we thank Tony. Thank you so much. Okay, now from that low energy speech, I'm going to bring it up a notch. Not possible. I'd like to invite Elaine Mullen, the daughter of Peter Mullen, to come share some words on behalf of her siblings and the Mullen family.
Okay, I am not as good as Tony is at doing all that talking, and you also said mostly everything that I'm going to say. But anyway, thank you. So I'm here on behalf of my siblings, which unfortunately none of them could be here tonight, and have been asked to make a few remarks about my father, Peter P. Mullen. But first, I'd like to thank Marc Howard, as Tony did, and his team for spearheading the return of this evening's event and organizing this lecture and the dinner afterwards. I have very fond memories of attending some of the original lectures with my father early on when the professorship first started, and I'm looking forward to tonight's presentation. I wanted to tell you a bit about the background story of how we are all gathered here tonight. My father graduated from Georgetown University in 1948. Georgetown was a formative influence on his life. It was a Jesuit liberal arts education, and he just didn't think there was anything better than that. He felt that a Jesuit academic institution provided a perfect combination of education, being guided by religious beliefs, and a commitment to making the world a better place and helping those less fortunate, men and women for all. My dad loved Georgetown. In fact, he so thoroughly embraced its Jesuit education and mission that he didn't think there was any better place to go to college. He told my siblings and I, "You can go to college anywhere you want to, but I'm only paying for Georgetown." It's not surprising that 4 out of his 5 children, including myself, graduated from Georgetown. My father also served on Georgetown's board of directors for 17 years and was board chair from 1985 to 1992 during that very tumultuous period. I'm pleased to say that my son Griffin is in the audience tonight, who also graduated from Georgetown. I can fondly recollect my husband and I visiting Griffin many times during his Georgetown years for basketball games, parents' weekends, etc. And Griffin loved it when we came down because he always got a good meal out of the visit. I think back to my Georgetown years, which overlapped with my dad's membership on the board. For all his many trips down to DC for board meetings, committee responsibilities, strategy sessions, etc., he was so busy attending to Georgetown affairs that I don't think he ever had enough free time to meet me for a cup of coffee. Definitely a different parenting approach back then. Professionally, my father was executive partner at the corporate law firm Skadden Arps, Slate, Meagher, and Flom. He was responsible for leading the strategic direction, diversification, and development of Skadden Arps from a small New York City-based law firm to 1,000 global lawyers. He incorporated Jesuit ideals by promoting community engagement that other competing law firms tended to overlook. During my father's tenure as executive partner, Joseph Flom led the firm's highly successful corporate takeover practice during the wave of corporate takeovers, mergers, and acquisitions in the 70s and 80s. Together, Joe and my father established the Skadden Fellowship Foundation in 1988, which since its inception has provided 2-year fellowships to more than 600 young lawyers pursuing public interest law. After my father's retirement in 1998, Joe Flom led the charge at Skadden Arps to establish and fund a founding gift for a professorship at Georgetown School of Government, named the Peter P. Mullen Distinguished Visiting Professorship. This professorship recognizes an accomplished attorney with significant contributions to the university and the field of law. This year, as you know, our distinguished visiting professor is Martin Tankleff, a defense attorney and leading voice for wrongfully convicted people. My father had the belief that our legal system formed a basis for freedom in our society, and that everyone has equal rights and is entitled to justice under law. Because of that, my father's ideals match up perfectly with Marty's dedication to social justice. Ironically, Jason Flom, Joe's son, who is speaking after me, is also an ardent advocate for wrongly convicted people. Jason and Marty have become close friends through their shared passion for criminal justice reform. Both have also gained national attention as vocal advocates for those who have been wrongly convicted. Based on the close professional ties between my father and Joe Flom at Skadden Arps and the prison advocacy connection and personal relationship between Jason and Marty, it's remarkable to me that Marty's award of the Peter P. Mullen Distinguished Visiting Professorship has come full circle. Congratulations.
Thank you, Elaine. Thank you to your siblings, to your parents, and to the whole Mullen family. You're really a part of Georgetown, and to Griffin. So now I'd like to introduce someone who really needs no introduction in the criminal justice reform space. He's one of the biggest supporters of reform. He's a founding board member of the Innocence Project. He's the host of the hit podcast, Wrongful Conviction. So he's a peerless justice warrior all around the country, but he's also made a huge impact here on the Hilltop. Even though he personally has no connection to Georgetown from his roots, he has been our primary supporter from day one, the first supporter of the Making Exoneree program in 2018, which allows our students to go into the field, to travel, to investigate wrongful conviction cases. He was also the first supporter of the Prison Scholars Program, where we offer credit-bearing classes, and we now have a degree-granting program. That all started with Jason's generosity. And he had one condition when he made that gift, which is that the first cohort of scholars at the DC jail be called the Martin Tankleff Scholars. And we were glad to oblige. So I will always be grateful to Jason for his belief in our program, our mission, and for his generous support of our work. But tonight, Jason's here, of course, in a different capacity. He's here as the son of Joseph Flom, and you've just heard about this extraordinary connection to the Mullen family and to the Mullen professorship and to the new occupant, Marty Tankleff. So, Jason, the floor is yours. Thank you.
So a Catholic, a Protestant, a Jew, a blonde, and a lawyer walk in a bar. No, wait, sorry, no, I can't tell that joke. I also couldn't resist. Wow, thank you for that introduction. Elaine said everything I was gonna say, so all I had to do was tell a joke. But I'm really here tonight, because of my dad. And my dad, as anyone who knows me knows, was my hero and my mentor. And my dad loved, among other things, my dad loved the law. My dad loved championing the underdog and lifting up the oppressed and providing a platform for gifted, disadvantaged youth, among others. And my dad loved Peter Mullen. And they were an unbelievable team. I think they were sort of yin and yang. And they built something. I remember when I was a kid, I used to go and work in the Xerox room on the weekends. There were about 10 people there. And as years went on, you needed like triple CIA clearance just to get near the damn Xerox room because of potential conflicts and God knows what else was going on in there. But anyway, my dad, I have to tell a little bit about my dad, and I want to talk about Marty. My dad, it's an important story, I think now, especially now, because my dad was a son of immigrants. Like many Sephardic Jews, they were from Ukraine. They spoke no English, and they were homeless. When I say homeless, they moved every month, because in those days you could get a free month's rent in Brooklyn just by moving into an apartment. So they moved monthly. So they were nomads, I guess you could say, in Brooklyn. They were technically homeless, but he went to City College at night and worked during the day and slept on the subway, which pains me to say that now that the New York City mayor has put in a policy of arresting people for sleeping on the subway. That would have been my dad, because that's where he could get his sleep. And anyway, he had almost as unlikely a path to law school as Marty did. He never went to prison, but he never graduated college either. But he famously wrote a letter to Harvard Law School when he got out of the Army and said, I don't have any money, I don't have a college degree, but I'm the best thing since sliced bread. And if you let me in, you won't regret it. And sounds like something you would do, Marty, right? And yeah, he's nodding. And for those in the back, and they gave him a full scholarship. And so, so I think if he were here, he would see a lot of himself in Marty. And that's probably the best compliment I can give you, Marty. And he would be extremely proud to know that you are the recipient and the sort of the next flag bearer or standard bearer for the the Mullen position. And it gives me great joy to see you, particularly you, with this incredible honor. Now about Marty. So I got to know Marty just shortly after he was released from prison. And I was very taken. Obviously, his story was well known in New York, where I'm from, and well known in the innocence world after his 15 failed attempts at freedom and his perseverance. And of course, Marc deserves a huge amount of credit for the work that was done to get him out. But very early on, I was able to be helpful to Marty to some degree, and promptly forgot about it. Well, he didn't forget about it. And without getting into any detail, I will just say that Marty not only, I won't say repaid is the wrong word, but repaid my gesture. He paid it forward. Much more importantly, he paid it forward. He's paying it forward today, and I know he's going to pay it forward for generations to come. And the ripple effect, the Marty Tankleff ripple effect shall be known and felt by countless people, some of whom won't ever even know his name, but they'll benefit from his incredible spirit. And I have benefited from knowing him. So Marty, I said before, my dad was my hero, my mentor. Now I have another hero. You are a hero to me and to so many others. And it's my great joy and honor to be here today to celebrate you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jason. And you're a hero to Georgetown too. So now it's my turn to share a few words. And it's hard for me to sum up how much Marty Tankleff means to me. If I had to list the most important people in my life, it would be my parents, my wife, and our children, and then Marty Tankleff. And actually, this isn't just me saying something here. I have proof of it because I've written 3 books. The first is dedicated to Lise. The second is dedicated to my parents. And the third is dedicated to Marty Tankleff. My kids are a little upset about that. They're like, how come he jumped in front of us? But Marty inspires me every single day. And I know that most of you already know the story, but I want you to just pause and think about what he lived through and what he's doing today. Having just turned 17 years old, 10 days earlier, Marty woke up to find his parents brutally murdered in his own house. This is the ultimate nightmare for any child to experience. And then the very state institutions that are supposed to protect us, to preserve justice, sent him to prison. They put this kid into a steel cage for over 17 years after losing his parents. I mean, can you imagine anything worse happening to someone? Yet somehow, Marty persevered. He stayed positive. He learned, he grew, he prepared himself. And then on December 27th, 2007, a day I'll never forget, one of the greatest days of my life too, he emerged from prison with his spirit unbroken. And since his exoneration, he's pursued his education. He was in a college classroom 2 weeks after getting out of prison and got his BA in record time. And then while working as a paralegal, he took law classes at night and got his JD and passed the New York bar exam and became an attorney who now fights for others. And on top of all of that, he's one of the most upbeat and positive people on earth. So I don't know about you, but that really inspires me. And on the days when I'm really tired, or I'm frustrated about being stuck in traffic, or I'm disappointed in something, thinking about Marty just drives me. And just like when I think about Omar, al-Shoghreh, who endured 3 years of torture as a political prisoner in Syria and is now fighting to change that evil regime, and amazingly is a student in our class right now today. That inspires me and drives me. And just like the millions of people in Ukraine today who are resisting a brutal and unprovoked onslaught, that inspires me. So Marty's a hero to me too, not only because he survived, and that alone is extraordinary, but because he's a warrior for justice for others. Now, in the video tribute that you saw, you might recall Steve Braga saying, and Steve was Marty's attorney for 15 years, was extraordinary. He couldn't be here tonight, and he shared that tribute. And he said, there's just something about Marty. And when he said that, it really resonated with me, because I know exactly what he means. Now, that something is probably what led us to be friends when we were 3 years old at, you know, it's coming, lovey-dovey preschool, where it all started. And that something is likely why I believed in him when we were 17 years old, and I thought he was innocent. And that's why I advocated for him with the very limited tools that I had. We had no social media, no internet. We had the Purple Parrot, our little high school newspaper, where an editor was saying, Marty Tankleff is innocent, and the rest of you are wrong. That's something about Marty's definitely what led me to make him a promise in the prison visiting room that I would change my life and do everything I could to help get him out of prison, including going to law school when I was already a tenured professor at Georgetown. And that something is also the reason why I kept inviting him back to speak to my classes at Georgetown, and why I proposed that we co-teach a class together, which is a unique class called Making an Exoneree. And in that class, and we have our contingent here from the current cohort, our students reinvestigate likely wrongful conviction cases, and then they create short documentaries and social media platforms that push for publicity and, we hope, exoneration. Our 2018 class was covered by a production company for a documentary, and that documentary is now entered and winning awards in multiple film festivals around the world, and hopefully will be available soon on a major streaming service. Now, if the technology doesn't fail us, we're going to show you the trailer for that documentary, and that'll give you a sense of what our students do in this class and what it's all about.
I'll just sit in jail and fight it forever. They know what they did is wrong. They ignored 7 witnesses in the confession. The case is full of corruption. So I'm just going to keep fighting.
We have so many wrongful convictions because there's a rush to closure above the truth.
Innocent until proven guilty should be upheld, but it's not often.
The criminal justice system doesn't work like it does on Law and Order.
So many people believe you must be guilty of something. You wouldn't be sitting at a defense table at a trial.
Marty himself was wrongfully convicted when we were seniors in high school. His parents were murdered. He was convicted of murdering his parents.
Guilty.
And I would tell people, I have a friend who's in prison who's innocent.
6,338 days I was in prison before I was finally released. So when Marc asked me to teach a class at Georgetown to save someone else's life, how could I say no?
Our goal for this course is for this to be life-changing.
Each team of 3 or 4 kids is taking on a case of wrongful conviction.
So the shooter shoots once in the air and then 3 times at you.
Justin Baumgartner's body was recovered
right here.
I want to know what the hell went down the night of May 3rd, 2008.
The holy grail for us would obviously be one of our 5 getting out.
Don't just walk out with blood all over you after murdering 3 people. Just go over to your neighbor and be like, hey, what's up? Nonsense.
We know it's an uphill battle. We know it's really hard to get somebody out.
Do you not agree that there are wrongful convictions?
Oh, there absolutely are wrongful convictions. This isn't one.
But we're going to try to show there's a major injustice that took place here.
The tape was stopped at least 4 times. This is evidence contamination.
Where's your sketch? Where's your micrograph images? Show me some proof that those marks match.
These are lawyers who take oaths to their profession, and they cheat, steal, hide evidence.
3 people said Valentino Dixon was the shooter, but there's 10 other people who said it was a different person.
Even if I was to get my freedom tomorrow, I'm labeled a murderer.
You literally feel like you have someone's life in your hands, and at the end of this course, I want to be able to give these people hope.
These kids are smart, They're passionate, they have an interest.
Good catch with the phone! Wow!
But this isn't just a class. This isn't just about wrongful convictions. This is about people's lives.
So many lawyers have been trying to get people out for years. What are we going to do? We're college kids.
You are eligible for release today.
The long and the short of it is that our students reinvestigate, they go out into the field, they take a new look at cases where people have been condemned and have spent decades in prison. And while many people thought this was just a little mock exercise or a cute activity that we had our students doing, 4 months after the end of our first time teaching this class, Valentino Dixon walked out of prison after 27 years of wrongful conviction, thanks to the work of our amazing students who are in that picture there, and then on the stage with him in Gaston Hall. And then, thank you. And then, next slide. Well, some people thought, okay, they just got lucky. 2 years later, Eric Riddick walked out of prison after 29.5 years of wrongful conviction in his case in Philadelphia. And then a month later, Keith Washington was released from prison, and the judge said in his remarks, "Thank you, Georgetown, keep up the great work." Now, we have more cases coming. We will likely have more exonerations this year. I also should mention we're going to have an event in this very room on Wednesday, April 6th, where we're going to have Eric Riddick and Keith Washington in person, along with the 6 students who worked on those 2 cases and helped to secure their freedom. Now, Marty and I do this work together, but I just want to be clear, none of it would be possible without Marty. He's the cornerstone of this program. And every time our students look up at him, they see the very thing that we are trying to achieve, which is getting an innocent person out of prison. And that motivates them just the same way it motivated me all those years ago when Marty was in prison. And what we're doing is we're creating a movement of justice crusaders. And I want to add that this work is so closely related to Georgetown's Jesuit identity and values. We are genuinely creating Hoyas for others. And so now I'd like to invite to the stage my lifelong friend, my recent colleague, and my forever inspiration, the new Peter P. Mullen Distinguished Visiting Professor, Marty Tankleff. And now that he's here, I have a little surprise. On behalf of the Prisons and Justice Initiative, the Department of Government, we have
That's it.
yeah, this beautiful memento.
Thank you. Or we can look at it later. It's kind of hard to follow what everybody said because I think what I had prepared was incorporated into everything, but I'll try. So growing up, I had no intention of going to law school, becoming a professor, or doing this work at all. My father was a businessman and I wanted to follow in his footsteps. Growing up, I would, as a very young kid, and Marc may remember when I was in elementary school, I would go around and find candies that were on sale. I would go to closeout businesses, and I would come into high school with a briefcase full of candy and I would start selling it. Probably wasn't a good thing because I ended up practically getting suspended. So that was kind of my first exposure to when you were trying to do something nice or good that, didn't pay off. But this led me to the motivation of wanting to become an entrepreneur. And my father and I started a sports memorabilia business when I was young. We called it TNT Sports. And growing up, that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to become a businessman, an entrepreneur. But September 7th, 1988 would change my life forever. I woke up, I found my mother murdered and my father clinging to life. That day should have been the first day of my senior year of high school, but it was the first day of, in many ways, the destruction of my life. At least I so thought back then. Within hours, I was brought into police custody. I was interrogated. The lead detective said at one point, "We pumped your father full of adrenaline and he's identified you." Later on, they said, "We have your hair in your mother's hands. We know it's you, Marty." I was arrested. I was charged with murder and attempted murder. My father eventually succumbed to his injuries a few weeks later, and I was re-indicted for 2 counts of murder. Eventually, I was freed on bail, and I was able to fight for my freedom while I was out. But on June 28th, 1990, after almost 12 weeks of trial and 8 days of deliberations, the jury returned a verdict of guilty. On October 3rd, I was sentenced to 50 years to life. The state of New York had their way. My first chance of freedom would have been October of 2040. While I was in prison, I reconnected with Marc. And this was years after some failed appeals. Marc came to visit me, and he made a commitment that he would do everything in his power to continue fighting for me. Marc made a decision to go to law school back then. Thankfully, though, after years of appeals, including almost 24 new witnesses that came forward, new forensic evidence, I was exonerated and released on December 27th, 2007. But Marc made a commitment to go to law school, even though it was free. And now Marc and I are both colleagues under the New York State Bar, and it's an honor that we were able to achieve this. After almost a decade of coming down to Georgetown and speaking to Marc's classes, Marc and I made a kind of a conscientious choice to start this class called Making an Exoneree. I can remember because, as everybody knows, at Georgetown, we met the Tombs, and I'd had lunch there many times, and we were sitting there having a burger and maybe a beer, and we kind of said, let's do it. Let's make a difference in people's lives. During one of our recent classes, Omar asked another exoneree, Bilal, that was on screen, if you could go back in time, would you change what happened? Would you change what shaped you to the person you are today? It was a moment I'll never forget, because I don't think I ever thought about the impact I had in this world, or where I would be in society, or where others would be in society if I didn't go to prison. And I really started to think about what I've been able to accomplish, even from my time in prison and since I've been free. And one of the things I said to Omar, I said, I remember that there was a man, a Jamaican man, he called himself Bigger. And Bigger said prison saved his life. And I didn't really understand until we sat down over coffee, and he said, if I was free, I would have been dead because of all the bad choices I made in life. Whereas in prison, getting a college education, getting training saved his life. On that very Friday, I really started to ponder everything I've been able to do because of Omar's question. Through this class, as you know, Marc and I have walked 3 men out of prison: Valentino Dixon, Eric Riddick, and Keith Washington. And there's no doubt we will have more to come from our former students and all of our current students here tonight. Many of the students have gone on to law school, graduate programs, and 2 of them, some of our proudest students, are working at the Innocence Project, where they get to pass on everything we've instilled in them, which is fighting for justice, which is trying to make a difference in this world. Through our work, Anthony Apanovich, a man who was freed from death row because of DNA, was returned to prison after being free for almost 18 months, after being on death row for almost 30 years because of a technicality in Ohio. Thankfully, because our students made a documentary about his case, people started to take notice. They started to sit back and say, this is insane. How is a man who served almost 30 years on death row back on death row because of a technicality? Thankfully, we just learned recently that the Ohio legislature is now considering a new law that would potentially free Tony, because in Ohio, if a defendant did not make the request for DNA testing, he could not benefit from it. And in Tony's case, it wasn't him, it was the state. But if it wasn't for our students in their documentary, Tony may be executed, but we're confident that he will be free one day. Just a few short weeks ago, another case our students worked on, Terrell Barrows, finished an evidentiary hearing after 2 weeks. It was those students who were able to uncover exculpatory ballistic evidence, exculpatory DNA evidence. They were even able to find a rap song that the person we believe committed the murder admitted his involvement and cleared Terrell. Marc and I are extremely hopeful that within a year, Terrell will be on the hilltop in this very room, making a difference. Another one of our cases, Alan Warren, led by 3 amazing students, one of you will hear from later, may have a chance of freedom because of change in the law. I believe the reason why there may be a change is because of the students' documentary that people noticed. The Ohio Supreme Court recently issued a ruling that would enable Alan's lawyers to file a reconsideration motion that would give him potentially a new trial. But if I didn't go to prison, would any of this been possible? Since December 27th, 2007, the day I was freed, after 6,338 days in prison, I have made a commitment to speak to legislative bodies, legal groups, police departments, even the former Suffolk County Police Commissioner, the police department that put me in prison, I've spoken to them, high schools, colleges, universities, all in an effort to make a difference in this world. When it comes to criminal justice reform, I've been instrumental in having legislation passed in several states in the last few years, including Utah, Oregon, and Illinois, that protects juveniles during police interrogations. We're currently waiting on legislation to pass in Colorado and New York. Tragically, when I testified before the Colorado legislative body, there was a lot of opposition. And Jason, you would find this interesting because one of the opposition was, it costs too much to record the interrogations. This is not the first time I heard this. Years ago, when I was at the City Bar Association, a detective representative said, well, you know, it costs too much to record interrogations. I said, how many hours can I record on this? Then he said, well, record the interrogation, suspects are going to know what we're doing. And I said, if you're not doing anything wrong or illegal, why should you care? My testimony in front of these legislative bodies shed light upon the unjust interrogation practices used by law enforcement. I've also held the position of Innocence Project Exoneree Advisory Board member, and I'm currently an Innocence Project Policy Advisory Board member. And just recently, because I went to prison in many ways, I'm now a board member of another one of Marc's projects, the Frederick Douglass Project for Justice. In my short legal career as an admitted attorney, I've had the opportunity to represent a diverse group of individuals. But there's one I want to tell you about. This is a young man, close in age to all of you in this room, driving home from work one night when he was pulled over. And eventually he was charged with driving under the influence of cocaine. He was freed. I started representing him. And it took almost 2 years to finally get the documents that led to him being charged with driving under the influence of cocaine. But before that, I went out to lunch with him. And I said to him, tell me, did you do cocaine? I'll represent you no matter what, but I need to know the truth. He looked me straight in my face and said, I didn't do cocaine at all. When I finally got all of the paperwork from the DA's office, just happens to be the Suffolk County DA's office, the same one that prosecuted me, I sent it out to an expert witness. About a week later, I think it was a Saturday or Sunday, I spoke to this expert witness who said, your client was telling you the truth. He's innocent. He didn't do cocaine. So what do you mean, doctor? He said, the individual who was tested before him came back a high positive. They never cleaned the machine. They never calibrated after that. So the residue on the machine led to him being positive. That Monday, I walked into court. I said to the judge, I said, Your Honor, I said, my client's innocent. We're ready to go to trial. And I said, we have an expert witness who's going to come in and testify. He turned around to the DA and the DA said, will your client accept a speeding ticket? We took the speeding ticket. But it was at that very moment I finally understood how valuable and necessary it is to fight for your clients every step of the way. Because had I not fought for my client, had I not been persistent in getting those records from the Suffolk County DA's office, had I not sent them out to an expert witness, my client would have been going to prison. And I think, as the students may remember, one of my other lawyers, Bruce Marquette, came and spoke to the class on this past Friday. And I always heard the story about how good lawyers work within a box and great lawyers work beyond the box. And one of the first times I heard that was when I was taking a criminal law class at Touro University. The strange thing was that the professor was the one who told me that, was formerly an assistant district attorney that fought to keep me in prison. So imagine that the man who fought to keep me in prison was my professor, who taught me that great lawyers think beyond the box. And when Bruce spoke to the class, it's exactly what he said. Great lawyers speak beyond the box and think beyond the box. One of the former recipients of the Mullen Visiting Professorship was Seth Waxman. As many may know, Seth, former Solicitor General. But the one thing you may not know is that Seth Waxman was partners with Steve Braga when Steve started representing me. While Steve couldn't be here tonight, Sheila Kadaguthar, one of my attorneys that fought for many, many years alongside Steve, is joining us. Sheila, I want to thank you and every one of Team Tankleff, because if it wasn't for your dedication for years, I wouldn't be standing here. And Jason. I've known Jason for about 14 years, not as long as I've known Marc. But knowing Jason, being friends with him, knowing who Joseph Flom was through Jason, and to be able to get an award that Joe was instrumental in putting forward, and hearing about Peter, it brings me joy. It brings me joy to know that I will be able to continue with a legacy for years to come, because I have no doubt that the work that Marc and I are doing is so important and so critical that we will continue to make a difference in this world. And before I close, would all my students please stand? Current and former. So every day that I come to this university, thank you. Every day that I get up and fight, I do it for them. Because I know that while they're here, they will continue and leave a lasting legacy. Just this semester alone, we're working on 2 death penalty cases. One of them is the one that Omar's working on. So imagine the history that we are creating, that we have a young man who could have been executed, and whose professor, that if the death penalty was on the books in New York in 1988, I would be dead, because Suffolk County put the most men on death row. So to have Omar and to have every one of our students do this work, it's memorable, it's rewarding, it's fulfilling. Marc. So I've known Marc since we were 3 years old, but starting at lovey-dovey preschool, could I ever imagined that Marc and I would teach a class together? Not in a million years. Could I ever imagine that Marc and I would be able to expand the work we do here to discovery? Because Marc and I have worked with the Discovery Network. And just today, one of the cases that we worked on is a death penalty case. The Juan Balderas case went public. So for the years that Marc and I worked on this case, and Leslie is one of the people from Discovery, it just creates more rewarding work. I mean, Marc and I have been to Texas. Marc had the opportunity to visit Juan on death row. And to do this work is something that I think Peter and Joe would respect and love, because we are making a difference. And To me, if I didn't go to prison, I wouldn't be doing this work. Keith Washington may not be free. Eric Riddick may not be free. Valentino Dixon may not be free. Every young boy, girl, child that's going to be protected because of the legislation that I've been instrumental in getting passed will be protected, because there should never be any more Marty Tankleffs. There should never be any child that should go through what I went through. In closing, I just want to thank the Mullen family, Joseph Flom and Scott Norps, Jason Flom, Tony Arend, the Georgetown University Department, the Prisons of Justice Initiative, and especially Marc Howard. When Marc and I first started teaching this class in 2018, little did I think we know we'd have that much of an impact. We believed it because we believe in this work. We believe in it because society needs to have a better understanding of the problems with the criminal justice system on a fundamental level. One of our students, I won't mention who, recently said that in the 2 months that he's been in our class, he's learned more about life than he has in several years at Georgetown. To me, it was a moment that I realized how impactful the work is that Marc and I do. And to be honored tonight with the Peter P. Mullen Distinguished Visiting Professorship, it's hard to imagine. To imagine that on December 26th, actually December 20th, I was serving 50 years to life in a maximum security prison, not knowing the following day I would get the decision that I'd been waiting for years. And 14 years later, I would be standing here before you receiving this title. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm just going to add that while we would never wish this on anybody, what Marty went through, but we are all better off, and so many people are being helped thanks to Marty and what he endured. We'd now like to turn to one last little element, which is that in addition to the Mullen Professorship, there's actually a new endowed position that was created, and thanks to a gift by Jeff Perry, who couldn't be with us tonight but is watching on the live stream, which is the Robert Katzmann Fellowship for a teaching assistant for the Making an Exoneree class. You want to take it from here?
Sure. So to understand how impactful this fellowship is for myself is that Robert Katzmann was a judge on the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals is where you heard Guido Calabrese speak from, was the one court that ruled against me and kept me in prison. But knowing Guido's position with me and knowing how impactful Judge Katzmann was to the institution, Marc and I decided that creating this fellowship to be bestowed upon our TA was just the right thing to do. And without further ado, we would.
And one more thing is Robert Katzmann, who was a former professor of government at Georgetown and a core part of our institution, and was previously tied to the selection of the Mullen Visiting Professor. So you see how these webs of interconnection are extraordinary. We wanted to honor him. He passed away this past June. He was a giant in the field of law and very close to the heart of Georgetown. And so we've established this, and we're really proud to announce that our first occupant, Eleanor Nell Haney. I want to give a big round of applause. And she will now give a 30-minute presentation. Just kidding. If you want to. So thank you all.
Wait, you have to come up and speak, because if you want to become a lawyer, one professor told me, first day of class, he said, if you can't get up in front of the class and say a few words, quit being a lawyer. But you don't have to come up. You're not in class. You can come up if you want, though. Okay, I'll take it. Okay.
Mark literally told me this morning I didn't have to speak, but after
I
that,
meant it.
I'm not going to say anything other than that it's been the most incredible honor and privilege of my existence in the 21 years I've been alive to work for these two and just be inspired by everything that Marty has been through and to turn back. I feel like it'd be so understandable to want to leave the area of criminal justice forever after what he went through, but he did the entire opposite and has just turned to make a difference in so many people's lives, all of the students, and more importantly, the people we're working for. So thank you both.
I think she gets an A+.
A+.
Thank you all so much for coming. Congratulations again
Thank
to
you.
Marty. And thank you to the Mullen family.